So we're waking up with, here I am plugging my charger in. And we're waking up with 5 grams of creatine, 5 grams of 𝕯𝖤𝖕𝖕𝖘, 1 magnesium supplement. Not sure what the milligrams are on that. Let me look real quick. So you got this, citrulline booster, nitric oxide booster. Got the vitamin C, 400 milligrams of magnesium, and took in the 40,000 volt boron magnesium mix, electrolyte mix, about 10 drops. I need to clarify an error that I made where I said it was 10 scoops. I don't know, you just get sick of constantly monitoring yourself. It's so bizarre what we do in this culture to learn to and to be taught to film ourselves. I'm gonna grab my shoes real quick. Yeah, like recording everything we do and everything we say. It's a real display. Grab my chair. Grab this chair. My kids are in Hawaii with my terrible mother and terrible ex-wife. Terrible witches. And the reason that I don't interact with people when I go do live streams is because the algorithms are obviously terrible. Even with all the advanced AI, they can't seem to find commonality, though I could look under an Emerson Drive Erica Kirk video where she's telegraphing the whole fucking thing all the way down to the scenes at the end of the video. She's my kind of crazy. What the fuck? She's a different person every time you look at her. Pop my back. Totally unattractive. The witches can't even produce good looking witches anymore. To draw you into the ontology and the Wiccan mysticism. Now, I'll tell you, if anything did happen, this is the alternate reality that we cannot escape. Like, we got trapped in the Terrence machine elf hell. So I'm going into a walk now. I'm just kind of charging my phone up, sipping on some coffee. Like I say, my kids are in Hawaii with my terrible ex-wife, who is much like is disingenuous as Charlie Kirk's widow, who I believe that was a ritualistic sacrifice. She can't even act, you know. She's too rich. 𝕯𝖤𝖕𝖕𝖘. Erica 𝕯𝖤𝖕𝖕𝖘, from a very affluent family. In fact, she had inherited over $23 million. If you want to find out more on this, you can go on to 𝕯𝖤𝖕𝖘𝖙 or Already Dead podcast. And it's pretty easy to find. You got Jose and Austin Picard and some other folks from other channels making some great contributions over there. And then you've also got Jay from Operation GCD coming out with some amazing information that somehow seems to be tied all in together when we look at programmed killers and what's really going on when we get further into the gematria, the symbolism, and the fact that these occult practices have to be displayed out in the open. You know, you think, why are they doing it out in the open? Because that's what signifies that it's a ritual, right? Never, not for one moment, did I buy Charlie Kirk's bullshit. I could see that he didn't believe what he was talking about himself, that he was just spitting out facts. Turning Point was used to bust January 6 rioters, right? It's just a bit, and at that ending scene in that My Kind of Crazy, 𝕯𝖒𝖕𝖕𝖚, Miss Arizona, winning Trump's little Miss Arizona pageant, but not even placing in Miss America. Right now, she's probably Miss America. Miss Occulted Witch America. Right? That's what this is all about. And it's happening out in the open. We're just desensitized to it. Like, this is up. And I don't even have all gray hairs yet. I mean, you know, admittedly, a lot of the people in my direct generation, just in the like 5 years of when I was born, they're already getting sick and dying away. It's pretty sad to see. I post a lot of items up about Kevin with 𝕊𝖒𝖕𝖘𝖙𝖊𝖗, because I find it extremely compelling, because these are guys that I remember, you know, talking to people like him, you know, like 30 years ago. He would have been, you know, working his landscaping job, huffing plastic bags in the back of a truck. And you can just see the type of guy that he was, where he's like, oh no, I'm staying, you know, in this moral objector category, right? So I have animosity towards his character, but I have total reverence and respect, as well as a lot of grief for the current dilemma that he's going through, the pain that he's suffering, and his really sweet wife, Bridget. Like, to me, from my perspective, Kevin with 𝕊𝖒𝖕𝖘𝖙𝖊𝖗, we are literally seeing a man evolve that otherwise wouldn't have had to evolve if not put under, like a diamond in the rough, not put under this tremendous amount of pressure, right? Where he is being canceled out, but he also has some compelling things to say. But the majority of the people that are on his, we've got ants scouting for, I'm doing my best. I spray a mixture of soap, just dish soap with a combination of vinegar, and it throws off their ability to be able to navigate back and bring the troops. So I'm kind of doing that at the same time as I walk, and as I walk around the stack of weights in the living room that I will get to. I've just been working my arms. I haven't an arm-centric week in quite a while. See, when you're doing like natural, let's call it bodybuilding, body sculpting, what have you, body contouring, body bettering. I mean, there's too many monikers that it could go under. At my age, 56 this month, it's just staying alive, right? While everything's shrinking and disappearing, you're trying to retain some of the stuff that keeps your heart pounding and keeps you alive. And you know, I don't want to be cliche and say it all goes by really quickly, but this is part of the pre-programming where you're supposed to say that, right? you're supposed to come to these regrettable places and go, and then go into this other 𝕯𝖏𝖕𝖘𝖙𝖊𝖗 type paracosm where it's like you forgot all the things from the past world, i.e., the 1980s going into the 1990s, right? And the transition where that world literally does not exist anymore. It's amazing that there's any video footage of it, because what we contend, like the video that Erica Kirk, and I've done a breakdown on this, but all you have to do is do a quick reference and look this up, and then see the telegraphing that was being done. And when I say that, I'm saying that more from a computational model system like Conrad Zuse, Alan Turing. Let's throw Jacobo Grinberg in there. In that the ontology really is a default, a computational default, right? I don't just believe that that's the only interface that's occurring. I think that any postulation of, oh, this could be the universe. We have this multiverse theory, right? Worlds theory. And it's like, yeah, all that's true. It's bending and contorting as chains of numbers and subsets, like the Mandelbrot set, and all of those points are valid. But which one do you choose, or which one chooses you, right? How can you find the origin of your codified thought strand? What makes you tick, who you really are? And that's what we're all doing. Like, if you really settle down for a moment and you look at all this bullshit that's going on around you, you don't know Charlie Kirk. Chances are you never met him. Maybe you went to a rally. You have no way to validate whether or not that was a real person. In other words, even when you think that you're watching, and I'm not saying it wasn't, what I'm saying is the program is on display. And this is the mark of success that your grandma tells you, or at least the grandmas of the old days, right? In this sort of temporal carnal wisdom, fake it till you make it. You want to know what that really means when you break it down? Assume a role. Assume a role. See where a role could be required, whether it's a job in the office, somebody that you're trying to lure in, right? And be partners with. See the role, see the value, right? What they place value in. See what's missing or what could be done better. Jump in and be an actor and go to the pathos, rhetoric, play and sway, right? Through rhetoric. This is really what rhetoric is like. When you get back to the Grecian times, really the Greco-Roman times, you'll see that is really the mark of everything was done with ritual. This was known. This was just a part of life, right? Everything was done with a certain cadence and balance, honing back to nature, right? So when we look at these strange occult rituals, we don't understand what's going on, right? Why do they do things in a certain way? Why the procession, right? Why the symbols pointed in a certain direction? Because I'm not saying that paganism is evil or bad. I'm not saying it's not. But what I am saying is these runes, this number system, the things that they talked about were in fact noticing the ontology, and perhaps much closer to the ontology. There's depictions and stories told of when the moon was much closer to us, right? There's someone named Crow77, CRROW, if you're familiar with that channel, who he just started posting back up on YouTube again. Personally, I think he pulled off because he's greedy, but it's not that he doesn't have some valuable information to display. And they're a higher IQ subset of he and Jason and God, what's Rose? So there's like a trio going on there where they're really doing a good job running the channel and doing regular live streams. And that's just because, frankly, there's money in it, you know? And that's a big issue that I always had with Crow, the things that he says, his channel. And at the end of the day, you're like, oh, could you blame him? I mean, and it's like a lot of people aren't greedy. A lot of people don't place money, the fabrication of money, at the top of the altar, right? So wherever you have this codified number subset and system, you have a currency and you have a reverence to the currency. And so this creates a guideline to whether or not you truly follow a God of principle, or if you were just following that God of principle because everyone else was. You know, you look at God, I'm kind of drawing a blank. I need to sip on more coffee. You look at these ruins where there was volcanic ash that instantly buried. I'm thinking Mount Vesuvius. It just came to me and I lost it. Help me out here. We're waking up. And then my mind's scattering around and thinking Göbekli Tepe and all this stuff. It'll come to me later, but you see where these people were instantly frozen and buried, right, in the ash, in the volcanic ash of that perfectly preserved them, to where it really harkens back to like the A-bomb being dropped on Hiroshima. And you know, if you've been watching all the Godzilla movies, you'll see how that really impacted and affected the Japanese people in modern culture. Well, where you have this unstoppable monster, right? That is really, it is the West, but it had to be written in a sort of dialectical codified tone so that it would last. And ironic that when I was a kid, everybody wanted to play with the Godzilla dolls, right? So do you think that because some toy company grabbed onto that, that the root meaning has been washed away? And the inference, the tie with that I was making toward, you know, these civilizations being buried in volcanic ash, and there's still being sort of a mold left, or a preservation in some cases. You have the literal shadows, right, in Hiroshima that captured the last moment of that person's physical, carnal, temporal existence, right? So when we talk about this and we look at things like what Aleister Crowley, Jack or John Parsons, L. Ron Hubbard were all involved in there, you know, this whore of Babylon, the Lady of Babylon, to bring about the moon child, right? And when you look at certain people and think, oh, well, you know, Anton LaVey's daughter, she's a Buddhist. And when you look at her on video, if you want to go watch that Jordan Peterson interview with her, that is one strange entity. Like something was put in that person. Now, she might think that she's a Buddhist and just a nice woman or whatever, and just playing it off like she's some normal sort of woman, but there's something really strange going on with that person. I urge you to go look at the interview, you know? And of course, you know, they have a story behind them. They have this story of how they have a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, right? For her, it's come to Buddha, a balancing, a recalibration, an escape from the evil, you know, throngs that she was thrown into, right? And when you look at it and you take her a closer, more perspicacious measure, looking at Anton LaVey and so forth, you see that these people were just mere characters, right? Characters in a pantheon of arcana and personality, or persona, that hail to the ego of an entity that we can't see, but that we are an integral part of. And I'm not saying that in a way where we're like, embrace the Wicca, embrace nature. I'm saying that in a way of we were made to be a fraction of the totality or the whole. We were engineered and manufactured with that in mind, right? To the point where you have this messianic figure, Isis or Jesus, right? Jesus, where you've got this cult where John the Baptist will step up, James will step up, Judas will step up, the Gospel of Mary will step up. Don't you understand that all these different apocryphin, right? And all these different gospels, these codices, display them as the higher 13th tier or expression of the procession done at a specific time, right? And so this does lead back into Dionysian and Thelemic sex magic, sex worship that harkens back to a religion that was there, taught, understood, and known by what we assume as very primitive peoples, right? So a lot of these studies, by the way, there was an interview with Randall Carlson on Tucker. Is it Tucker Carlson? Yeah, I guess so. I didn't watch it. I'm not a fan of old Tucker. I don't like him on any level. I don't trust the guy. I don't agree with him. I used to be able to tolerate like interviews, but I just can't. So there have been like some shorts surfacing. So I just kind of post those up here and there, but by no means, if I post something up, am I a definite advocate of the channel of the information that I post, right, on this channel or any other channel that I have. It's just information. That's how I see it, right? But that gets to the point of, aren't we just information? In other words, our ability to be an autonomous self, a complete self, as we truly go through this great work to become a full-fledged burgeoning self, we find that we come up short and that we're referred. It's almost like we're going to like an unemployment office and we're being referred to another program. It's like, no, you don't find the truth here in meditation. You don't try and find the truth here when you're doing psychedelics. You don't find the truth here when you really do soul searching and you humble yourself. No, you're actually going to fail and die, and then you're just going to be cast out into another operation. In other words, looking through the lens that Michael Levin looks at when he's studying xenobots and anthrobots, right? And seeing that, okay, this is a pre-programmed, codified operation that these particular bullfrog embryo cells do a specific thing, are made for a specific purpose, but what the hell's going on when we change the shape of the thing? It changes its behavior, and it no longer references back to its original programming. So you begin to see this geometrical codified behavioral existence, right? That it now becomes something else because it takes on another form, right? And you start to get into Digimon, Pokemon, and you realize, well, you're throwing a sphere, right? This could be a blotch sphere. This could be a planet. This can be an orb. Like, here we are describing in a billion different ways with new words, pleroma, the monad, or the egg as a gestational womb, where there's a wall, a firewall placed so that an entity and its genetics can form and then become, in the temporal world, of partiality, right? Born under a certain sign, born at an exact moment, right? And then when we see that creatures, entities that seem to be born outside of that seem to just die, get diseases, right? Come out malformed, right? It doesn't have any care about the suffering. And in fact, the suffering is something that is expected. So the suffering that somebody might be born in total agony and pain, well, that's just part of the entropy. So when we get into describing God and all the various Godheads that all these religions distinctly say this is how God operates, right? Our God is a jealous God, right? I mean, there's so many things that you could say going through the back of my head through all the brainwashing and programming that's been going on. And I'm not going to proselytize it. But I had to go to church and I had to study something and listen to something that I knew was just complete bullshit and gibberish. Now, what you were supposed to walk away with is the main principles, not just the tenets, not just the edicts, but what happens in religion is they expect you to adhere to the surface layer. In other words, don't make ripples. The pastor, the preacher, is a child molester or a cheater. And trust me, I have personal experience understanding this, okay? On many levels. Me and my friends turned in a priest that was trying to molest us when I was a kid, right? Me specifically going to the same church that I did when I was a child and learning, as well as being connected to some of the most vile people, right? Some of the most sinful people connected to those youth programs. Going there later, I watched the total corruption right out in front of me of this young pastor who I could see through, and he knew I could see right through him. He knew that I could see through him. And I remember the day when he was being shopped for, and he goes, don't mind this guy who pulls up in this fancy car. He's literally saying this. And the guy pulls up in the fancy car, walks in, shakes his hand after watching his sermon, likes what he sees. Next thing you know, like I would say days after, and this is what the preacher or the pastor said. He goes, I'm going to be moving on to a very good offer by this large program that offered me a great deal of money, and that's really why I was here, was to work my way up. I'm not going to lie. And it's been fun. It's been real. It's been fun. But it's kind of like time to move on. Like there was no other, when you talk about like non-prosaic, right? I mean, this guy was making no qualms about it. And I remember the fancy Maserati and the bullshit, that surrounded the whole thing. And that's what's accepted today. Is, oh, well, you gotta eat. You gotta get your bread and butter. When you sacrifice yourself, your soul, what you contend as yourself, and you're willing to take on another self, well, that's what's taking place now, right out in front of you. I urge you to look at Erica Kirk, Church, Circe, Mother Circe. Go look at Jordan Maxwell's breakdown of that. And even more so, where Captain Kirk came from. And then the strange thing is that around the time that I was hearing this, I was looking up the new Star Trek, the new generation, right? Captain Picard, right? And what he was based on. The weird thing was, I go down this rabbit hole where his character, he was named after Jean-Felix Picard, whose brother, Anton Augusta Picard, they were Swiss inventors, right? Swiss of high altitude ballooning, and in fact invented the first cockpit that went up into space, supposedly, right? And that through that family line, their offspring would take that cockpit on and test it in this like 8-week long, 6 to 8 week long trial around the US in these deep river systems, right? That nobody goes in. right? Or at least at that time, right? And just stayed submerged for 6 to 8 weeks to test the survivability of it, right? And the thing must have been built like insanely well, right? So this obviously ties into von Braun, ties into these more recent statements that have come out to the general public, which is that von Braun supposedly on his deathbed was talking about this false or fake alien invasion, that was something that was being planned out way back when, right? But to get back on track with the Picards, they were brothers, is that the character Professor Calculus in Tintin was an amalgamation of those brothers. And admittedly, Hergé wanted to make the character very large. Like, he saw, so I think he put a lot of that sort of continuity, comical prowess into the Thompson twins, right? Which is going off on a whole nother direction. So not only that, right? Not only that, but it was either Augusta or John Felix, was said to have made the statement back in the late 1940s that for $250,000 he could take anyone to Mars. So I want you to think about that. Think about the high altitude ballooning. Think about the efficiency of the cockpit. What more would you have to do, right, than to take the cockpit up to the highest altitude possible prior to being able to just for a very brief period of time use some sort of jet propulsion that would nearly be weightless, right? At that very moment, right, where this high altitude balloon would no longer serve its purpose, right? They were studying that transition, right, to where they just had to make it up into the upper atmosphere before possibly casting out a solar sail. So when you begin to think about this and you go, wow, you're looking at Oumuamua, you're looking at this I-3 Atlas. I wonder if we had, 75 years, but really going back toward 2017, right, and so forth. I wonder, right, how far we could have gotten, let's just say with the date today, 75, 76, more like 80-year time span of at least when this whole thing was like being purported, right? I mean, when you get back to the Wright brothers, the first in flight, 1901, 1902, it's very subjective because you had Lehman Gilmore and all sorts of other people that were supposedly doing the exact same thing at the same time, and sometimes with more efficacy. Now, whichever one, just like, that paraphrasing Napoleon, that, history is basically whoever it's a lie made up. It's whatever you see out in the news, the north, east, south, and west, right? West and south. It's whatever you see circulating out there that you believe. And your mind has to be able to fill in the blanks, just like I was talking about, where people are just money grabbers. They have displayed who they really are. They're always going to go into a situation and think about, it's not just survival because there's no self there. They are a program. When they talk about NPC models or NPC programs, right, non-players, just short codified aspects of a character that display a visual acuity of authenticity to say, oh yeah, this is real enough for me. And so have you ever married somebody who is devoid, right, of a soul, who has no complexity, no depth, right? And they want to call these people, they want to go say sociopath, psychopath, right? Borderline, histrionic, right? Bipolar. They want to start naming names But then what ends up happening is the people who are hearing the voices, the people who are seeing what's really happening, are then put on these pharmaceutical medicines that go back to a lot of the things that 𝕯𝖕𝖕𝖈, again, when I talk about people, I'm not saying that I'm a fan or that I fully align or even understand what they're doing, and I don't think they understand what they're doing. I think a lot of people that get into Satanism will endure the destruction of themselves, because what they begin to see is once they start to venture into the truth, like, in other words, as long as they live a lie, they're okay. And there's this sort of false holy light, really the Luciferian light seems to display itself more so in the people who are deceiving you, in the pastors and the preachers, right? In the people who have a pivotal role in deceiving you, right? Then when somebody is just honestly displaying, I'm a Satanist, right? Like Jason 𝕯𝖒𝖕𝖘𝖙𝖊𝖗 says, I'm not a Satanist, but. And so Jason was pressed on this by Jesse Michaels, ironically, Peter Thiel's little butt boy, right? And I've been seeing, this is going off into a whole different direction, but I've been seeing people making statements under the Gray-Pilled podcast, right? And Jules and the Undead, which oftentimes play similar or the same content, right? I think they kind of have recently changed their roles a little bit as Jules is starting to build up more subscribers on his own channel, right? Which I like what he looks at. He's a no bullshit sort of guy for a young guy, right? He's a young father, as is Jose, and they're both looking at this thing in a way where they're trying to still give credibility to the fact that Charlie Kirk indeed was shot and passed away. But there's many, many people out here that do not believe that Charlie Kirk died. In fact, there's just as many people that don't believe that Epstein died. There's people who look at the ears, maybe even John McAfee, right? Who knows how deep this goes? But to the point where they have some sort of offering to give back to a system to rebuild. And this is what's postulated, is that there's this break-off civilization of elites, and the elites are the people who have gone through and proven themselves one way or the other, even though they were given the information, fully admitted it, and led through, such as Nikolai Tesla, where he was known to blatantly say that he would put a piece of paper down by the side of his bed, and that he would wake up, and sometimes the very thing that he was instructed to study, how to study it, what to study, was written in a language that he didn't even understand, and he had to go decipher it. So you literally have this conduit, this person who's set on a certain frequency, right? Born on a certain day, is part of the codified field, right? And, it sounds tacky, but when I look at Peacemaker and my fascination with that show, it really is kind of, it's like you could look at James Gunn and say, oh, James Gunn's a genius. And it's like, no, he isn't. He's not a genius. There's people who allow themselves, who supplicate to pick up on the transmission, to interpret, but not really put any free thought into it. Just state the facts, ma'am, of what they're being told about reality, directly messaged into their heads. And so this does get into program killers, obviously. This gets into the pharmacon that 𝕯𝖕𝖕𝖈 talks about. When you're talking about Galen, when you're talking about Marcus Aurelius. And I will contend, off of what I know about the world and what I know about people, is that Marcus Aurelius and the meditations were exactly that. That's not who Marcus Aurelius, the physical man, really was. He was going about these meditations because he may have been drawn into an MK Ultra type of situation. Right? When I say that, I'm saying direct messaging, that he had to create this dichotomy within himself to be able to continue on and live with himself, to where the ontology doesn't really care what you're doing physically. It doesn't see the physical as anything but like from a Hinduistic perspective, a waking dream, maybe not even a waking dream. But to say that Marcus Aurelius was writing out these meditations as his life was completely, if he had those virtues, if he expressed those virtues, how in the hell would he have such a slut for a wife? Why would he even have a young, slutty wife in the first place? Think about it. Think about it. Why would he have a son that was such a terrible, terrible, despotic ruler, Commodus, right? To where the commode would be named after him, quite literally, right? So when you begin to get in, and then the drug use, then the pharmacon, then enters the pharmacon, right? Is that the reality, the world of unreality that you cast before you